Hello everyone, welcome back to our video series on introductory syntax. Today I want to talk about some practice with X-bar theory, particularly integrating the TP and DP rules that we talked about last time, and also some of the typological predictions of the X-bar theory that we've built so far. As you may notice, I am wearing a bow tie. One of the number one requests I've gotten from the last two videos is where are the bow ties? I do own quite a number of bow ties. I also own quite a number of long ties, regular ties. And so I'll be integrating both my bow ties and my regular ties throughout the rest of the video series. So I want to go back and look at our X-bar rules and talk about them. So we have our specifier rule up here, which says that an XP can go to either a ZP, which again is another maximal projection, another phrase, that Z stands for a variable, followed by an X-bar, which is an intermediate projection, or it can go to, and so that ZP there is that specifier. And we'll see this in action again today. We really saw this really being used in the last video. So if you are confused by this rule, go and review the last video, which looked at DPs and TPs, which really was the first time that we saw specifiers being used in a real way. So this rule can come in two different ways. English really only uses this first example right here. I'm pointing it the wrong way because it's mirrored on my screen. That ZP, XP goes to ZP followed by the X bar. But according to the X bar principles, we could in principle have a rule that says X bar goes, that the ZP, the specifier, follows the X bar. And we'll actually talk a little bit about that towards the end of the video today. So that's something to keep in mind. We have our adjunct rules. An X bar can go to another X bar followed by a WP, or an X bar can go to a WP that then with another X bar following. And these are really a place of iteration, of recursivity within the system. And this is the adjunct rule. So this is a place where we can see sort of stacked adjective phrases, a place where we can see stacked prepositional phrases, stacked adverb phrases, and other types of phrases like that. One thing that's important to recall is that all of these rules in the system that we're building are not optional. And this is something that is different than many modern approaches to syntax. We're not utilizing the most modern approach to syntax. So more modern approaches, more merge-based approaches don't necessarily use this fully projected, always requiring these intermediate nodes, even when they're not necessary. But the truly X-bar theoretic projection-based theory that we're building does require this. So we are going to utilize these intermediate nodes even when they are not strictly necessary. So we're going to have these sort of vacuous intermediate nodes, these vacuous bar notations, even when there's no adjuncts there, for instance. And this is a change, and this if you're familiar with other systems, or if you're watching this video and you're studying from a book other than the Carnie text, this is likely going to be different than the system you're doing. So that's something to be aware of. And then the last rule down here is our complement rule. It says that an X bar goes to either our head, our X0, followed by a YP, or a YP followed by an X. And we're going to see this rule in a good deal of action as well today. We're going to talk about some of the typological predictions of this rule as well. So that's that's just a reminder of the rules. And so what I want to do today is just draw, really just, we're going to do the same sentence using our tree, using these rules in our X-bar theoretic system. Starting with English, we'll then turn to think about some of the typological predictions, and then we'll call it. So I'm going to try to do this as best I can. So we're going to take a sentence. The woman ate a sweet biscuit. And we're going to do this tree in two ways. We're going to start this tree starting with drawing the tree from the bottom up, and then we're going to do the tree again from the top down, just to practice both means. So here is our... All right, so we need to stand up. Here's our sentence. And our first step, whenever we're doing a bottom-up approach, is we want to label our lexical categories, lexical and functional categories. So it doesn't really matter which way we start. So we'll start with the. In this case, that's going to be a determiner. Woman, that's going to be a noun. Ate is a verb. Is a determiner. Sweet is an adjective. And biscuit is a noun. So there we go. You can see it. Our next step is going to be to start with building the structures for any modifiers that are going to, because those are going to be the most deeply embedded things in these bottom down when we're doing a bottom up structure. So we're going to start with the structure of the phrasal structure for sweet. So sweet is the adjective. It's ultimately going to project up to an adjective phrase. We're going to have to follow all of the stages of the X-bar rules. So we have an adjective that's going to project up to an adjective bar, which is then going to project up to the adjective phrase, like so. We can then look at biscuit. Biscuit, we can ask, does it have a complement? Well, it does have a modifier, which is sweet, but sweet is not the complement of biscuit. It is an adjunct. We could do a bunch of tests to, modification tests and other separation tests, things like that. But it's not a complement. So what we're going to need to do is we're going to put in an n bar. And then we're going to connect these two with a second n bar, like so. What's important here is this is what's noting that this adjective phrase containing sweet is an adjunct. Because to be an adjunct, or according to our definitions, you need to be the daughter of a bar and the sister to a bar. And if we didn't have both of these bar levels, we would be saying that sweet is a complement, and that would be incorrect. And these definitions are important to us. We then have the determiner in this here. But remember that we now are going to make the determiner sort of the head of its own phrase, which is going to take the noun phrase as a complement. So we're just going to close off this noun phrase after this n bar. So, like so. Then what we need to do is the next step with our determiner. Well, as I just said, the determiner is going to take that noun phrase as its complement. And I'm going to try to leave myself enough space on this little board. So it's going to take, and this tree is going to get a little messy here, but as you can see, the determiner is taking the noun phrase as a complement. So it has a D bar, which is dominating both the NP and the D. And then that's going to project up to a DP. Our next question is what happens with the verb? Well, our verb here is 8. And our question is, well, what does 8 have a complement? Well, 8, yes, in this sentence it does. The biscuit is the object of eating. It's what the thing that was eaten. So this verb is going to, again, I am woefully did not plan enough space on this tree. Oh boy. Oh boy. Yikes, yikes, yikes. We'll figure it out. I'm probably going to have to do some erasing and triangling to give us enough space to do our TP. That's going to be okay. We'll figure it out. So once I get us our through the VP, we'll triangle back through, and not ideal, but it'll have to be what it is. So we're going to make a V bar, which will have both the verb contained within it and the DP as the complement of the verb, because the DP, how we know it's the complement is that it is the daughter of the bar and the sister to the verb. And then from that, we can just go straight up to our verb phrase. I'm going to go ahead and just erase this and just triangle this whole structure. I'll put this up for a second so we can see this structure. And then I'm going to triangle this so we can work on the rest of the sentence with enough space. Fortunately, this whiteboard is a little small, and this is only going to get nastier as we move through. I can try to work on some higher tech versions of this, but it's what we got right now. Okay. So restarting. We have a VP down here, all triangled. So last time we talked about the T, and that's actually something that we missed when we did our lexical category, is that there is this null T that exists. So we're going to go ahead and put that in. It's null. It actually, it exists with respect to 8. There's sort of a relationship there that we're going to get to later on, but we're not there yet. But there is a T present in the sentence. It's assigning tense to the overall sentence. And that T is taking as a complement the overall verb phrase. So we're going to go ahead and add a T bar here and join those two together. And before we can kind of finish that off, we have to jump back over and build our noun phrase over here, the woman. So let's start with woman. Well, woman doesn't have any modifiers. the kind of modifies it, but it is now in its own separate phrasal category that attaches above can meet together. To form a TP, because this DP is the subject of our sentence. And that's our sentence. So that's going from the bottom up. Let's do the same sentence, but from the top down. I could hopefully plan space a little better going from the top down. I'm normally a little better at this. That's normally how I draw my trees, so let's do that. It's going to be the same sentence. It's just going to be our, the skills are just going to be a little different. I'm going to leave our T node in here because now we're going to remember that we have to do that. It's actually easier to remember when we have to do that when we go from the top down, because the T is the first thing we're going to encounter. Okay, switch to red. So the TP is, again, the top of the sentence. We're eventually also going to make some modifications to this, but for right now, the TP is the sentence. And it, in its specifier position, is going to have the subject of the sentence, which in this case is our DP, the woman. So we're going to have to create a DP out of this. So we know that a TP contains a specifier and a T-bar. So we can do that like so. It could also contain a CP or something else, but in this case it contains a DP. So let's go ahead and build this DP. Well, a DP, this DP certainly does not contain a specifier. It can contain a specifier. We see these in like possessives and things like that. This one does not. So it's going to go down to a D bar, and then we'll go to a D, which will be the, and then we'll have our noun phrase, an N bar, and an N containing woman. So there is that subject that we need. We'll jump over to our T bar. So that is going to be containing a T, which is a null marking past. And then that T takes as its complement the VP. The VP goes down to a V bar. Again, we've seen this before, that there's something special about this specifier position in the VP. I've kind of alluded to this in class. We'll talk about this in a bit. There is something going on here. We haven't gotten there yet, but keep that in mind. But it's going to just go straight down to a V bar. In this case, there's no modifiers, adjunct modifiers within the verb phrase. So we're just going to go straight down to the verb and its complement. The verb is ate. Then we're going to get to a DP complement. I'm just going to erase the sentence down at the bottom here and hope that I have enough space. If I write small enough, I might be able to do this. So there we are. That'll go to a D bar, just like it did in our subjects. We'll have a D, a noun phrase, an N bar. That's going to split into an adjective phrase, an adjective bar, and then the adjective sweet. This is getting a little cramped down here, but I think you can still kind of see what's going on. Then we'll have another N bar over here, which will go down to the N, biscuit. And this is our sentence. And in this case, we can see the entire sentence. I was able to plan a little better. Let's see. Yeah, I was able to plan a little better. I'm generally able to do that when I draw top down. That's generally how I draw trees. Again, I think it's pretty typical when you're first starting to draw trees to start from the bottom up. But as you get more confident, to start from the top down. So this is the tree. So as we've talked a lot about, the English utilizes the versions of the different rules. It utilizes one version of the specifier rule, both versions of the adjunct rule, and one version of the complement rule. So one of the ways we can sort of develop from this is that maybe that's something we can utilize when we're thinking about cross-linguistic generalizations. That the X-bar theory can buy us good things, can get us positive results when we try to deal with what is happening in the world's languages. So I want to just look very quickly at one example where we can say, yeah, maybe that is a good case, and then say, well, but maybe we shouldn't go too far in this. So we're going to look at an example from the language Turkish. And the idea here is that if we set our complement parameter the other way, we're going to get exactly the right result that we want with respect to the Turkish results. And like an idiot, I forgot what this verb is because I only wrote down the Turkish. I know this is Hassan, which is a name, and I know this is book. Maybe this is read. Turkish speakers. I know this is in past tense. And that's like accusative case marker. But I don't remember what that verb is. Whoops. Sorry. Don't do this. This is a bad example. Anyway, I only wrote down the Turkish, not the translation, because I'm an idiot. Whoops. Anyway, it doesn't matter for our actual example here. We only need to know that this is a verb. This is a noun, and this is a noun. And this noun is the complement of this verb. So that's the important thing for us drawing this tree. So I'm going to do this tree top down, much the same way that we did last time, and just think about the application of these rules. So if we apply these rules in the same way that we did in English, we would get the wrong result. But if we apply much of the same rules, we don't have any adjuncts in this case, and we're not even going to worry about the adjunct rule. We're still going to apply the adjunct rule. We don't know which version, or if Turkish has both versions, but we know that the bar levels need to apply. But we can see the specifier rule in action because we have the subject of the sentence. So we're going to go to a TP. We're going to go ahead and give it a DP, even though we don't see a D there. We're just going to make it a null DP. And again, this is just partially for practice, for us getting used to the idea that noun phrases are determiner phrases. Now, this is not a uncontroversial idea that all noun phrases are determiner phrases by any means. But this is just the idea we're going to hypothesize and pursue for now in this class. Much like we did in English, we are going to, for now, just sort of put in null tense phrases. Again, this is something we're going to explore in a lot more detail coming up. So this is not something that I want us to just assume is how all languages work or anything like that. But for right now, it's just how we're going to operate. So, but when we get to the verb phrase, particularly when we get to right down here, we're going to see that the if we just try to apply the same rule as what we have in English, we would get the wrong result. But if we use the other version of the complement rule, we get the right result. So if we just say, well, the complements precede their heads, great. So one of the things we can say is, well, maybe X-bar rules are what we're going to call parameterized. That you have like little switches that say, you can have this rule, you can have this rule, checked on or checked off. And so English says we have this version of the complement rule, and Turkish says, well, we have this version of the complement rule. So that's one working hypothesis that we can sort of take advantage of. So I'm just going to go ahead and triangle Katab. So we'd get something like that. And that works actually pretty good, given our assumptions so far, for complements. It really does. And we can actually look at a number of other languages and see that it works really well for those. The trouble is, and I want to leave you with this, that it doesn't work as nicely when we think about our specifier rule. And again, these specifiers seem to be coming back over and over again as something of a challenge for us. And it comes back in two different ways. The first way is that we look at the world's languages. We look at the typological facts of the world's languages. And about 85 to 90% of the world's languages, it's hard to estimate exactly. There's Depends on how you count the world's languages, depends on how you analyze these different languages. But somewhere in that range of the world's languages are either subject, verb, object like English is, or subject, object, verb like Turkish is. But the important thing is that their sentence starts with the subject. And that follows from the specifier rule that we used for both of those languages. But if we're just saying that, well, languages can freely choose from those parameters, it doesn't make a lot of sense that it would skew so heavily in that direction. Particularly when we look at the fact that the complements are a lot more evenly distributed. So there are slightly more subject-object-verb languages than subject-verb-object languages, but it's not anywhere near that distribution. So that's one problem, that if we're just saying that there are these little like fuse boxes switches and you can have one or the other, or maybe both, we wouldn't expect that level of sort of broken distribution. The other problem is the type of distribution we would expect is that the subject would be final. And that is almost not found. The rare examples we do seem to find are languages, so we would expect to find things like, maybe object, verb, subject. And we really don't seem to find languages like that. Maybe there's some languages like Hicks-Cariana, but even those are controversial whether or not those are true examples of that typological pattern. So that should lead us to question whether or not that sort of fuse box approach, at least for the specifier rule, is correct. The other thing that we have to consider is that there's another pattern that we cannot account for with this approach, which is so I said that 85-90% of the world's languages are of this pattern, subject, verb, object, or subject, object, verb. There's about 8 to 10% of the world's languages that are verb, subject, object, and the distribution of X-bar rules alone cannot account for them. And the specifier rule certainly cannot. Just modulating the specifier rule certainly cannot account for them. So languages like most of the Celtic languages, Zapotec, things like that, are languages of this type, verb, subject, object, and they don't seem to hold to this. We're going to argue they follow general X-bar principles, but we need to do more to account for them. So we're going to have to complicate our system, and we're going to have to think about how to deal with these types of languages. So I want you to think about that, and I will leave you there. And again, I'm interested in doing an FAQ video, so if you have questions, please contact me. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you next time. Thank you.